Hello everyone and welcome to part 4 of the CTTL module entitled Education with Purpose, Understanding the Impact of Outcome-Centric Learning. For part 4, we will talk about assessing learning outcomes. If we recall our learnings from the previous installments of this module, we learned that in OBE, intended learning outcomes are multi-level. Beginning at the top, we have the university-level outcomes such as the graduate attributes. Going down, we have the program level, where we have the program educational objectives and the program outcomes. Then at the course level, we have the course learning outcomes, or the CLOs. If one would like to be as granular as possible, we can also have topic learning outcomes. Our topic now is all about assessing learning outcomes. We have already mentioned assessment many times in the previous installments of this module, but let us situate ourselves by first defining assessment in the context of education. For our purpose, assessment could mean neither of two things. 1. Assessment of the intended learning outcomes at university or program level. Or 2. Assessment of student learning at the classroom level. Assessing the upper-level outcomes such as the graduate attributes, PEOs, and POs, are the work of department chairs, deans, and other upper academic administrators. It is a complex topic and it deserves its own time for detailed discussion, but this much is clear. Their work will fundamentally depend on how well we do our part in classroom-level assessment. Thus, our role in OBE assessment is crucial. Assessing the intended learning outcomes at the classroom level will be the focus for this installment of the module. In OBE implementation at the course level, there is a three-pillar system composed of 1. Learning outcomes, 2. Assessments, and 3. Teaching learning activities. Assessment should reveal how well students have learned what we want them to learn, while teaching learning activities ensure that they learn it. For this to occur, the three pillars need to be closely aligned so that they reinforce one another. Their proper design and alignment will serve as a web that no student could escape without attaining the intended learning outcome. To ensure that these three pillars are aligned, we ask ourselves the following questions. Course or topic learning outcomes answer to the question, what do I want students to know and how to do when they leave this course? We have already discussed intended learning outcomes previously. We will see more examples, then move on to assessments and teaching learning activities. Assessments answer to this question. What kinds of tasks will reveal whether students have achieved the learning outcomes we have identified. These are the class requirements that we give to our students so that they can show their level of learning. These are the tests, quizzes, exams, projects, performances, and other similar tasks that we require of them. They also reinforce learning when feedback is given. Teaching learning activities answer the question, what kinds of activities in and out of class will allow students to attain these learning outcomes and prepare them for assessments? Now let us address another relevant question. What if these three pillars are misaligned? If assessments are misaligned with learning outcomes or instructional strategies, it can undermine both student motivation and learning. Consider these two scenarios. Scenario 1. Your topic learning outcome is for students to learn to apply analytical skills, but your assessment measures only factual recall. Consequently, students hone their analytical skills and are frustrated that the exam does not measure what they learned. Scenario 2. You design your assessment to measure students' ability to critique the arguments of different authors, but your instructional activity focuses only on summarizing the arguments of different authors. Students will probably fail in your assessment. Now let us focus on the three pillars, one at a time. Let us start with course learning outcomes. These are the final outcomes that an instructor expects their class to gain once they complete a course. For more appreciation of the coming examples of CLOs, I invite you to recall what we learned in Part 3 of this module, the designing of effective learning outcomes. Here are some examples of CLOs. Kindly recognize how they are written. You can see for yourself if the ABCD or action object criterion or action learning context approach is used in these examples. This first set is from an information literacy class. This next set of examples is one from my own class, a chemical engineering plant design class. And for a world religion class, kindly note that for the said courses, these course learning outcomes shown are not meant to be complete. We are just showing some examples. In actual syllabus, we write around 5 to 6 course learning outcomes, and we see to it that the entire set of course learning outcomes cover all that we want to teach in the class. Now let us proceed to classroom level assessments. We have here common classification of assessments based on their sequence of use in the classroom: the diagnostic, formative and summative assessments. Usually the first to be used by a teacher in a class is the diagnostic assessment. Diagnostic assessment can help us identify our students' current knowledge of a subject, their skill sets and capabilities, and to clarify misconceptions before teaching takes place. Knowing students' strengths and weaknesses can help us better plan what to teach and how to teach it. Some examples under this are pre-tests, self-assessments, or even brief interviews. Somewhere in the middle of the course duration, we usually give formative assessments. Formative assessments provide feedback and information during the instructional process while learning is occurring. Formative assessments measure student progress, but they can also assess our own progress as instructor. Some examples are homework exercises as review for exams and class discussions, question and answer sessions, some in-class activities where students informally present their results. Summative assessments take place after the learning has been completed and provide information and feedback that sum up the teaching and learning process. Grades are usually outcomes of summative assessment. They indicate whether the student has an acceptable level of knowledge gain. Is the student able to effectively progress to the next part of the class, to the next course in the curriculum, to the next level of academic standing? Some examples are high-stakes tests, midterm and final examinations, term papers, projects, portfolios, and performances. Some of these examples are worked on by students for entire semester, and due to the long process of student engagement on them, these are formatively assessed as well, at stages of their development. It is worthwhile to emphasize that in outcomes-based education system, we evaluate the level of student learning by comparing it against some standard or benchmark. This is not limited to the act of grading the student, but for the purpose of CQI, we will be expounding on this later. There are other types of assessments that are highly relevant in outcomes-based education, due to their alignment with student-centered teaching approach. One may consider the use of student self-assessment practice so that students may rate their own confidence in their work and understanding of course content. Another is student peer assessment. Here students will evaluate the work of other students within a course. It would help students to reconsider their own understanding of the course content as they evaluate the work of their peers. More traditional forms of assessment, such as objective-type tests, have no specific application in most real-world settings, but perhaps there is another classification of assessment, actually, a subtype of summative assessment, that is considered more meaningful, because it is more effective in preparing our students for real-life or professional practice. We call this the authentic assessment. It helps students contextualize their learning and to see how real-life conditions or situations, in all their unpredictability, ambiguity and complexity, affect their theoretical knowledge. Authentic assessments have several advantages over conventional tests, but may require more time and effort on an instructor's part to develop, and may be more difficult to grade. It is very important to highlight that while it is not absolute, authentic assessments are preferable toward the end of a degree, when students are comfortable collaborating and already equipped for working on less sharply defined problems, and when they have skills in reflection. Here are examples of authentic assessments for some disciplines. Note the complexity of these assessment tasks, which make them appropriate for students nearing the completion of their degree. I will give you time to browse through these. Can you think of an authentic assessment applicable to your discipline? For assessments, such as objective type of tests, marking and grading are generally straightforward. As we go up to the level of higher-order thinking skills, our criteria for grading becomes more varied and nuanced, and it becomes a challenge to remain objective and efficient. Rubrics can be a good tool that we can design and use for clarity of performance expectations. Rubrics are ideally given to students before they begin working on a particular task, so they know what is expected of them, or precisely what they have to do, for each of the criteria. Let me share with you a personal experience as an academic administrator regarding faculty's acceptance or use of rubrics among some engineering faculty members. Some very experienced and good teachers that I have known had said that using rubrics is a waste of time, though when I observed them on how they score computational and open-ended problems, they actually had a nuanced mental system of assessing what kind of output is just 20, 60, 80, or 95%. They actually had their own mental rubrics developed through long teaching experiences. I appreciate them, but I also believe that they could have been even better teachers if they were able to write and share their rubrics to their students. Now let us tackle the question, what do well-aligned assessments look like? These tables shown here give examples of assessment activities for different types of learning outcomes adapted from Bloom's taxonomy. Here, we are starting from the lowest level, to remembering where your CLOs could possibly use the action verbs recall, recognize, identify, objective test items such as fill in the blanks, matching, or multiple choice questions that require students to recall, recognize terms, facts, and concepts could be suitable assessments. In the understanding level, action verbs such as interpret, classify, compare, explain, to name a few, are best paired with assessment activities like problem sets, class discussions, concept mapping, and essay papers that require students to summarize readings, identify and classify examples. We are now on applying level. Action verbs such as apply, execute, implement are best assessed through problem sets, performances, laboratories, prototyping, or simulations where students can use procedures to solve or complete tasks or determine which procedure is most appropriate for a given task. Moving on to the analyzing level, action verbs such as analyze, differentiate, organize are best assessed using case studies, critiques, labs, debates, and similar activities that require students to discriminate, determine bias, values of presented materials, how elements function together. Here within the evaluating level, appropriate assessment tasks such as journals, diaries, critiques, problem sets, product reviews, or studies require students to evaluate, test, assess, monitor, judge, or critique readings, performances, or products against established criteria or standards. And finally, for the highest level, creating assessment tasks such as research projects, musical compositions, performances, essays, business plans, website designs, engineering designs, or set designs require students to plan, design, create, make, build, generate, or produce something new. Now, let us proceed to the last of the three pillars, the teaching learning activities. Others would just call this the teaching methods. Diana Lillard in her book, Teaching as a Design Science, Building Pedagogical Patterns for Learning and Technology, has classified learning activities into 6 types: acquisition, inquiry, discussion, practice, collaboration, and production. Let us discuss each one of these in detail. The first classification is acquisition. Here students explore ideas provided by their teachers, such as listening to a lecture or podcast, reading from books or websites, or watching demos or videos. let us clarify some possible misconceptions about OBE, which may have resulted from its strong preference or association with student-centered learning approaches. In OBE, we are not discouraged to use traditional instructional methods, such as lecture, since there are learning outcomes where this teaching method is both efficient and effective, such as in transmitting foundational knowledge. There are students that prefer it, and some teachers are very good at using lectures to share basic information and introduce to students very new and difficult concepts and theories. Even in innovative teaching methodologies such as the problem-based learning or PDL approach, lectures have an integrative and clarifying role instead of the usual straightforward transfer of information. On the other hand, research has also shown that students could learn more when lectures are supplemented with other activities such as discussions, small group work, and hands-on activities. At the same time, there are also some studies that demonstrate the general unpopularity of lectures, especially compared to interactive discussions. On the other end of the spectrum, overly forced, messy, and inappropriate innovative teaching methods may divert students from the true learning intention. An ill-selected innovative method could force the students to invest too much of their energy on the performance itself, instead of focusing on learning the concept. Another classification is inquiry. Here, students investigate, explore, compare, and critique texts and resources that reflect the concepts and ideas being taught. Examples include lab experiments, visiting spaces, online research, data analysis, comparing and contrasting texts. Under discussion type, learners are required to articulate their ideas and questions, respond to ideas and questions from their teachers and/or peers. Examples include in-class discussions, group discussions, online asynchronous forums, polling, think, pair, share activities, etc. In practice type of activities, students respond to tasks set by teacher, adapt their actions to the task goal, and use the feedback provided to improve their next action. Depending on the context, students can engage with feedback from self-reflection, peers, teachers, or from the activity itself. Included here are problem sets, quizzes, role plays, and games. Collaboration is the process of working together. Students negotiate their ideas and practice. This is most effective when students challenge each other and provide peer feedback to develop the best output they can. Small group work, project work, collaborative problem solving, jigsaw grouping are some examples. And finally, the production type of teaching learning activity. Students must produce an output set by the teacher. The learners are motivated not through the response from the teacher, but in the production of a public output. Possible production activities include blogging, developing models, prototypes or artifacts, video or audio performance, e-portfolios, concept mapping and writing. The last topic that we will discuss in this installment of the module is the measurement of the attainment of the course learning outcomes. Possibly, your default mindset on this is that this is just about grading assessment tasks, computing and submitting the final grades. You are just partly correct. In OBE, there is a wider dimension to this activity. By measuring the attainment of CLOs, we can determine where we can still improve in the way we deliver the course, create improvement plans, and implement these in the next cycle. Remember our discussion on OBE syllabus. The course is mapped onto some program outcomes. Within a course, we write CLOs, and by extension, these CLOs have to be aligned to the program outcomes previously mentioned. CLOs are generally spread across course topics, with assessment and TLA also assigned. Now, if our intention is to measure something, then there must be a meter stick which we use to quantify what we are measuring. It follows that there must be a target that we set and aim for. Choosing the meter stick and the attainment target is decided by the program heads, in consultation with faculty members. Based on the syllabus, where we indicated connections among CLOs, assessments and topics, we can generate a quantitative measurement on how well students are achieving each course learning outcomes. The levels of CLO attainment are indicated as highlighted. We computed two parameters or metrics here. 1. The average grades of the class per summative assessment, and 2. The percentage of the class that attained grade of at least 60%. We compared these computed values with our set standards. 1. At least 80% for average cohort grade, and 2. At least 90% of the students should have a grade of at least 60%. In this example, we see that the level of attainment for CLO3 and for CLO4 are below our set standards. Assessments and teaching activities for both should be revisited. Possible improvement plans should be drawn and should be implemented in the next class cycle. Now, for the million-dollar question, is course final grade not enough as measure of course learning outcome attainment? After all, it is all that we see in the transcript of records of our graduates. OBE agrees with the idea of Frederick M. Lord that it is not acceptable to determine a student's achievement of course learning outcomes on the basis of the final grade obtained in the course alone. Final grade represents the aggregation of too many factors, causing the student's level of attainment of the course learning outcomes to be diluted in the aggregation. A more granular level of analysis, one that is based on summative assessments per CLO, is more appropriate. We now arrived at the conclusion of this module installment. To summarize, assessments, course or topic learning outcomes, and instructional strategies need to be closely aligned so that they reinforce one another. Teaching learning activities have to be chosen properly. Good classroom management practices will be useful in implementing innovative teaching methodologies for a true student-centered learning. Authentic assessments are preferable toward the end of a degree, when students are comfortable collaborating and already equipped for working on less sharply defined problems, and when they have skills in reflection. Assessment rubrics allow for grading consistency and objectivity. The level of attainment of the intended course learning outcomes should be measured and compared to set standards. This is the basis of course EQI. To conclude this discussion, I would leave you with these reflection points. Thank you and see you in our next installment of this module.